Hello, welcome to the program. I'm Joe Mahan, and today we're going to be talking about the Dallas Cowboys. Now, I'm a New England Patriots fan, but love talking Dallas Cowboys football. But if I said three names, Jerry, Jimmy, and Barry, a lot of people would be saying, what are you talking about, a pop band from the 60s? No, Dallas Cowboys fans know who I'm talking about. Jerry, Jimmy, and Barry. Jerry Jones, Jimmy Johnson, and Barry Switzer. Jerry Jones, the owner of the Cowboys. Jimmy Johnson, coach, back-to-back championships with the Cowboys, Super Bowls. And Barry Switzer also won a Super Bowl as coach of the Dallas Cowboys. Now, for many years, I've been asking Cowboys fans, what happened with the Jimmy Johnson resigning after winning back-to-back Super Bowls. The story was after they won the second Super Bowl, they were in a bar, and Jimmy Johnson overheard Jerry Jones saying anybody could coach this team. So that got Jimmy Johnson fired up. Before you know it, they're holding a press conference where Jimmy Johnson's saying that he's stepping down. Now, Jerry Jones didn't fire him. Jimmy Johnson, I was surprised that he didn't stay with it, go for the 3 championships. Vince Lombardi, that was one of his goals when he first got hired on by the Green Bay Packers to win 3 NFL championships. No one had ever done it. Lombardi won back-to-back early in his career, and then they didn't get it the third year. A little further on in his career, Packers did win 3 NFL championships in a row, followed by 2 Super Bowls. So you could say they won 5 championship games in a row. So Lombardi was the first coach in NFL history to win 3 straight championships. And then I was surprised when Jimmy Johnson won back-to-back and wasn't thinking that he could be the first coach in Super Bowl era that won 3 championships. No one's ever done that. But he stepped down. Barry Switzer comes in from Oklahoma, won 3 national championships in Oklahoma. Comes in his first year, never coached in the NFL. As a head coach, he might have, as an assistant, I don't think he did. But first year, they go to the NFC Championship game. They lose to the 49ers. Steve Young gets his ring. His second year, Barry Switzer with the Cowboys, they win a championship. They beat Pittsburgh Steelers, win the Super Bowl. So now that Dallas has 3 out of 4 championships, 3 out of 4, 3 championships in 4 years, we'll say. So that's a dynasty. 2 with Jimmy Johnson, 1 with Barry Switzer. So Jerry Jones was the architect of that dynasty. So they got it done. 3 out of 4, you're a dynasty. The 49ers were a dynasty in the 80s. Joe Montana winning 4 Super Bowls. The Cowboys, dynasty in the 90s, 3 out of 4. And then in the 21st century, the Patriots had a dynasty in the early decades, 3 out of 4. The Patriots won. That was when they had Teddy Bruschi and Willie McGinnis. And then later on, they won 3 in 5 years later on in the next decade. So if you look at the dynasty teams, the Packers were the dynasty of the 60s, the Steelers were the dynasty of the 70s, 49ers were the dynasty of the 80s, Cowboys were the dynasty of the 90s, and the Patriots in the 21st century had dynasties in the first 2 decades. So Jerry Jones got the job done. They won 3 out of 4. They're cemented between the 49ers and the Patriots with their dynasty, so they got it done. But what amazes me with Cowboy fans, and I've been asking Cowboy fans this for years, they never mind giving Barry Switzer any love. They don't even give him any respect. But coming in with all that drama, Switzer didn't cause that drama between Jerry Jones and Jimmy Johnson. But Barry Switzer came in, got a championship in 2 years, cemented that 3 out of 4, that dynasty. So I think he got it done. And I'm a Patriots fan. I got no great love for Barry Switzer. You know, he ran kind of a renegade program at Oklahoma, but they won 3 national championships. He is a good coach. But here's the thing. In that dynasty, the 3 out of 4 with Dallas, Michael Irvin, the playmaker, was drafted by Tom Landry in that regime. Troy Aikman and Emmitt Smith were drafted by Jimmy Johnson. Larry Allen was drafted by Barry Switzer and Jerry Jones. And those were the 4 Hall of Famers from that dynasty run. The playmaker Michael Irvin, Troy Aikman, Emmitt Smith, and Larry Allen. So it's interesting that all 3, we'll say, eras contributed to that 3 out of 4, that dynasty. Now, since they won their last Super Bowl, it's been 25 years, they haven't been back to a Super Bowl. They haven't won 2 playoff games in a row since then. In fact, they have 2 playoff victories. I believe now it's 3. 2 with Tony Romo and 1 with Dak Prescott. So they have 3 playoff victories in 25 years. Never got to a conference championship game, and then obviously not a Super Bowl or winning a Super Bowl. And here's the thing, Jerry Jones tries. He spends the money, he's active, he's going for it, but some Cowboy fans think Jerry Jones wears too many hats. He's the owner, he's the president and the CEO, and he's the general manager. He's wearing too many hats. So that could be a big problem why they're not getting back to Super Bowls. Another thing I found out with the Cowboys is in now 2021, like 10 of 11 of their top paid players are people they drafted. So instead of going out and getting a great free agent and paying them, Dallas would rather say, no, we're going to pay the people we drafted, which a lot of them, people in the NFL and fans are saying they're not worth that money. So that'll hurt you if you're falling in love with the people you drafted instead of just trying to get the best players with the Cowboys. Jerry Jones, you can't take anything away from him as far as business. The brand of the Cowboys is at an all-time high. He helped the NFL bring football into Las Vegas. And I lived in Las Vegas for many years. I'm a native Rhode Islander, but I love Las Vegas. Lived there for 16 years. It's a great city. When Las Vegas got the Golden Knights, you should see the enthusiasm in that city. They finally got a pro sports team. They didn't have a pro sports teams all the years because of the gambling. The leagues thought, well, because there's legal gambling in Las Vegas, it wouldn't be a good city for a pro sports team. But the people in Las Vegas backed the Golden Knights. The enthusiasm was incredible. The Golden Knights go to the finals their first year in the NHL. Now Las Vegas has the Raiders, and they're backing that team, state-of-the-art stadium. So, and Jerry Jones, I heard, was instrumental in the NFL getting into Las Vegas. Now, another thing about Jerry Jones. I mean, I respect him, but at some point, being the owner and the general manager, should he have relinquished some of those duties, maybe to his son Steven? He brought in Bill Parcells for, I believe, 4 years, might have been 3. They went to the playoffs twice. He didn't listen to Parcells. Parcells didn't want T.O. Terrell Owens. And then a lot of the coaches that Jerry Jones has hired were kind of like buddy-buddy. His buddies, Dave Campo, I think he had 2 5-11 seasons. Chan Gailey, Wade Phillips did a good job. They had a 13-3 season. They wasted it. That was the year the Giants were 10-6. Giants came in and spanked them. Dallas was 13-3. That was the year Tony Romo went to Cabo on the bye week. Jason Garrett had a couple 12-4 seasons. that they wasted. 12-4, you're getting a bye, a home game. They wasted those. One of those was on the Des Bryant non-catch. I think it wasn't a catch. He had it with two hands against his neck, and for some reason decided to reach out with one of them, and the ball hit the ground. That was not a catch. I mean, if he would have held on to it and went down, he might have landed at the 1 yard line, and then you say, "There you go, coach. First down at the 1 yard line, I did my job," instead of trying to do it all. So, and that was too bad because I like Des. He'll give you everything he's got. But a lot of that's, on Jerry Jones. He's the general manager. Another interesting thing I found out about Jerry Jones, and this was years after the fact, he had done a 60-minute interview. And in the interview, he said that he prayed to the Most High, said, "Just give me one more," meaning one more Super Bowl after Jimmy Johnson left. And what happened? He got it. He got that one more Super Bowl. And then he said later in that interview, "I should have prayed for more than one." But maybe he got that one more. Maybe that was the time to say, "You know what, I'm going to step down from being the GM. I'll be the owner." We got one more. We secured the dynasty. But 25 years later, he never did. He's still running the show. And, Cowboys fans are very frustrated. A lot of the Cowboys fans that I talk to who remember Jimmy Johnson, and some remember Roger Staubach, they're still talking about Jimmy Johnson. That's 25 years ago. What about these last 2.5 decades? What have you been doing? And it wasn't. Jimmy Johnson won back-to-back championships. Now, Troy Aikman said if he would have stayed, we might have won 4 in a row. Yeah, that's a might have. Just because he was there doesn't mean you're going to win the Super Bowl every year. He won 2, and he stepped down. With Seattle, when they had the ball at the 1 yard line, yes, your odds are with you that you were going to win that game. You had the ball at the 1 yard line, on second down. It's not guaranteed, but if you were betting in Las Vegas, your odds were you're going to win that ball game. So it wasn't assured that Jimmy Johnson was going to win Super Bowl after Super Bowl. He won back-to-back, stepped away, and then Barry Switzer comes in, I believe, finishes the job, secures that dynasty, the 3 out of 4, and in my opinion, did a fantastic job. Because if you look at it, when Vince Lombardi retired after winning back-to-back he won 3 NFL championships in the first 2 Super Bowls. So he wins the first 2 Super Bowls and a three-peat with the NFL, and moves up to the front office. Now, Phil Benson, who took over from Lombardi, he didn't get to the Super Bowl. I mean, there was no more Super Bowl appearances for them for years. Bill Parcells, when he left the Patriots after going to the Super Bowl, he left Pete Carroll a very good young team. Pete Carroll didn't get that team to a Super Bowl, not even close. So I think Barry Switzer got the job done. Came in, he wasn't responsible for that drama with Jerry and Jimmy. Now, you'll see Troy Aikman and some of the Cowboys players taking shots at Barry Switzer, saying he really wasn't doing that much. He was more of a CEO, overseeing things. But to me, the bottom line was he's the coach of record. He got a Super Bowl championship, and he's got 3 national championships in college. So Barry Switzer's a good coach. So, one coach who did get the job done, Bill Walsh, won 3 championships with the 49ers. He retired, and the defensive coordinator, George Seifert, took the head coaching position. His first year, they win a championship, Joe Montana's 4th championship. And I'll say 4 years later, George Seifert was the head coach on another Super Bowl team when Steve Young got his ring. So there are instances where someone has left a great team and they get the job done, and others, they don't get the job done. One of the people will say about Tony Dungy built that Tampa Bay team, but he wasn't getting them over the top, and then they brought in John Gruden in his first year. They win that Super Bowl. That Tampa team, 3 Hall of Famers on defense: Warren Sapp, Derek Brooks, and John Lynch. So that was a really very talented football team, that Bucks teams of the early 2000s. Getting back to the Dallas Cowboys, Tom Landry lost 2 championship games to Vince Lombardi, and he lost 2 championship games to Chuck Noll. Tom Landry has 2 Super Bowl victories in 5 Super Bowl appearances. So, I mean, if he could have got it done, but he didn't, if he would have split with Lombardi and split with Chuck Noll, you might be saying Tom Landry's the best coach of all time, but that's a coulda, woulda, shoulda. But Tom Landry, one of the great coaches of all time. He was the defensive coordinator, and Vince Lombardi was the offensive coordinator on that New York Giants team that won a title in the late 50s. And then later on, Lombardi went and was hired by the Green Bay Packers. The Giants didn't want to hire Lombardi, who's from New York City. And he was very disappointed in that, to say the least. And the thing was, when Lombardi won his first 2 championships, he beat the Giants in back-to-back championships. The first one, it was the Giants visited Green Bay in the NFL championship game. Packers beat him 37-0. Just crushed them. There's a story before the game, Wellington Mara, the owner of the Giants, and he was a college classmate of Vince Lombardi. They went out to dinner in Green Bay. So they're having dinner, and Lombardi kind of stands up quickly, and he says, "Well, we're going to beat you tomorrow," and walks away. And as Vince Lombardi's son said in that documentary, he said he left Mara to find his own ride home. So, and the next year, the NFL championship game was in New York. Packers at New York Giants. Packers beat them 16-7. So, great coaches, Lombardi. Some people say Lombardi's the greatest coach of all time. Some Belichick, but it's kind of 1 and 1A. 2 great coaches. But now, a little back to the Cowboys. Some people will say Tony Romo wasn't that good. He's got 2 playoff victories against the Vikings and the Lions. But you could look at it this way. Tony Romo's an undrafted free agent, and he had a pretty good career. Now, he wasn't that good in those late games in the playoffs or late in the season when they needed to get to the playoffs. But considering he's an undrafted free agent, Tony Romo's a pretty good quarterback. Maybe a lot of that was Jerry Jones being over the back of all those coaches. Another thing I think now about the Dallas Cowboys, I think Jason Garrett should get another shot at a head coaching position. He's got a couple of 12-4 seasons, good coach with Jerry Jones on his back, and I'm just wondering what kind of job could he do if he had an owner and a GM that kind of said, coach the ball club, and we'll give you a little freedom, give you a little room to maneuver, instead of Jerry Jones calling down and saying, hey, run this play or run that play, if he does that. But I like Jerry Jones. I respect him. I remember a couple of years ago, Dallas needed to make the playoffs. The Giants would have had to beat the Eagles. So they were and Dallas was playing, I believe, Washington. So they're showing up in the owner's box. Jerry Jones looking around at the monitor behind him of the Giants Eagles game, hoping the Giants could win to save Jerry's season, the Dallas Cowboys. And I'm thinking, that's sad. You got to hope that the New York Giants are going to save your season. So, it's amazing. I'm hoping that Jerry Jones, I don't want it to be against the Patriots, but I'm hoping Jerry Jones and the Cowboys can win another championship after all these years. George Steinbrenner did that. He won those championships early with Billy Martin and then with Joe Torre. Then a few years went by and they got another championship. So I'm hoping that Jerry Jones can win another championship, because I think he's good for the NFL. He's a showman, loves going on talk shows and goes on Dallas local sports radio. I've heard some of those shows via YouTube, but Jerry Jones, good for the league, a showman. But the bottom line is, you can't, maybe drafting too many receivers in the first round, things like that, where maybe just draft offensive linemen, build your line. Tough to say, because, and the thing is, in Dallas's division, you got Daniel Snyder. That's good if you're a Cowboys fan. Daniel Snyder is not a good owner as far as putting good product on the field. It's kind of like in the Patriots division. Patriots fans, we love the Jets. We love Miami because they don't get it done. They make it easier for the Patriots to move on to get those buys. Now, Buffalo's been coming on the last few years with Josh Allen, but there was a long streak there after Jim Kelly where the Bills weren't that good. And those were during the Tom Brady era in New England. So a lot depends on your division. The NFC East, Dallas's division. When Buffalo went to those 4 Super Bowls in a row, every year they lost to someone in the NFC East. Twice to Dallas with Jimmy Johnson, once to Joe Gibbs and that Redskins team, and once to the Giants with Bill Parcells. So they were running into just Hall of Fame coaches. One of the things about I find interesting was when Joe Gibbs had the Hogs, that offensive line, Bill Parcells said, boy, we got to counter with that great offensive line, and he built a great defensive line for the Giants. And then Jimmy Johnson comes along in that same division and says, boy, we got to counter that great Giants defensive line, and Dallas builds that great offensive line. So there was a lot of jockeying for position in that division, but just want to wrap this segment up talking about the Dallas Cowboys from a Patriots fan perspective. I'm hoping that Jerry Jones can get another championship. I mean, I enjoy Jerry. I think he's cool. I mean, I like Jerry. I remember once I was working in the supermarket industry in Las Vegas, and I'm a Patriots fan, and the guy I worked with, Tim, was a Falcons fan. We'd be in the back room talking about Jerry Jones and the Cowboys, and we would call him Jerry. So hopefully Cowboys fans, keep the faith. Hey, you got 5 rings, you got 5 championships, keep the faith. You go on a run, win a couple more, you could be right there. You're already right there with the Steelers and the 49ers and the Patriots. So Cowboys fans, keep the faith. You'll get there. You'll get more championships, and just respect your organization, respect your team, and all the great things you've done for the league. So we'll see you on the next show. I'm Joe Mahan. Thanks. Back to the program. I'm Joe Mahan.
I'm Tyeler Durand.
We're going to be talking about Richard Sherman, and I'll tell you a little bit about his background. 5th round selection in 2011. He led the league in interceptions in 2013. And that was the year they won the Super Bowl. The Seahawks 43-8 over the Broncos. Of course, the Legion of Boom. This was something interesting I found out about them. That defense went 4 straight years, #1 scoring defense. It hadn't been done since the 1950s Browns. So now let's talk about the game that kind of made his name, Richard Sherman, the Michael Crabtree game.
It's a game I remember fondly. The 49ers are coming off a Super Bowl loss to the Ravens, and they're in the NFC Championship game again. The Seahawks are up. The 49ers are driving. They still have pretty much a good amount of time on the clock, maybe 2 or 3 minutes left, whatever the time might have been. And they're getting into good range. It looks like, wow, they really might go down and score. Kaepernick takes a shot to the back right corner of the end zone to Michael Crabtree, who was a solid receiver, but he was never, at that point, that was when he was in his prime before he got injured, and he was really, just an average guy after that. But he, Sherman tipped the ball away right into the linebacker's hand. Yep. I'm trying to think of the linebacker.
I think it was the linebacker who was the MVP of the Super Bowl 2 weeks later.
KJ Wright, maybe.
Malcolm Smith.
Malcolm Smith, that's who it was. Yeah, who ended up coming to the Niners as well. Malcolm Smith. That's right. And I was like, I know it's not Wagner, but great great recovery and play by Sherman to tip the ball away from Crabtree. Crabtree was never really in a great position to win that battle, especially against a guy in Sherman who's 6'3" and at the time was probably the best cornerback in the league. And the rest is history, right? The Seahawks go on to win the game. After the game, Sherman went to go shake Crabtree's. He went to go shake Crabtree's hand. Crab shoved his hand away, and then when the interview happened, if Aaron Andrews, as you said, says, "You don't try a sorry receiver like Crabtree on me. I'm the best in the game. Take my name out your mouth, or I'll make you shut it." Essentially, and it was this huge thing that really kind of everyone, like, if you were into football, you knew the Seahawks because they were just incredible on defense those couple of years, but it was the game that really kind of skyrocketed Richard Sherman to being not only one of the best, but one of the most recognized in the game. Right? It was like, oh wait, this dude's for real, and he's got a swagger about him that, for me personally, I love to see in certain players. There's certain positions where you really want to see a swagger, and Sherman certainly had that and more. But the whole defense did. That's why they were so good for, like you said, 4 or 5 years. And
then 2 weeks later they back it up, all that talk, by winning the Super Bowl, 43-8.
Against the Broncos, who led by Peyton Manning, were one of the best offenses we've seen in the last 10 years, maybe history, right? Peyton broke Tom's record or tied it for most passing touchdowns in a season. They had 3 guys over 1,000 yards receiving. They were unstoppable all season long until they got to the Super Bowl, and you knew it was going to be bad news when the center snapped the ball over Peyton Manning's head the first play of the game, and it was all downhill from there. It was all Seahawks. They rolled. They took all the momentum they had throughout the year into that game, and there's not too many times where Super Bowls are blowouts, but that a blowout's almost an understatement. They scored 8 points. It was one of the best offenses we've seen, and
so
that was really what was one of the best defenses.
It was
led by Sherman, but obviously there's a lot of other guys there. Bobby Wagner, who's still there, still one of the best linebackers in the league, but one of the leaders was Sherman, and that was one of the best defenses we've ever seen. They talked about it in the same breath as the '85 Bears, as the 2000 Ravens, and some of those teams that you really never forget. Right.
Yeah, and the other one I want to mention is the 2003 Bucks, who won the Super Bowl.
Another great one,
With 3 Hall of Famers on that team: Warren Sapp, Lynch, and Brooks. So. And
That's
the thing is,
defense,
which I didn't realize, doing some research for this show, Browner was on that Seahawks team that won the Super Bowl. He was on the Patriots the next year. So now let's switch to that play where Richard Sherman's kind of involved with Browner, the Malcolm Butler game. The Seahawks are going for back-to-back. They're on the 1-yard line.
I was one salty 49ers fan. Oh, yeah, I mean, look, as a 49ers fan, obviously there's not much better than the 49ers winning the Super Bowl, but a close second is, one of my favorite players in Tom Brady winning, but the Seahawks losing, right? They had just taken the Super Bowl from the 49ers the year before, then they get back, and it's like, really, like, they've got this young quarterback, this crazy good defense, and here they are in the Super Bowl again. And it looked like they're going to win. They have, the Patriots have something about them in the Super Bowl where other wide receivers just make these otherworldly plays, right? Obviously we talk about the helmet catch, Demario Manningham's sideline catch, and then it happens again with Jermaine Kearse, I think it was, where he kicks it in the air and pulls it in, and it's like, is this really happening? So as a 49ers fan and a not necessarily a Patriots fan, but a Tom Brady fan, I'm like, this can't be really happening. I'm rooting for the Seahawks to lose more than anything. And there they go, 1-yard line. Donta Hightower makes this incredible tackle to stop Lynch. And instead of going back to them, they try to throw it. Malcolm Butler makes one of the best Super Bowl plays we've ever seen, and we ever probably will see, It always reminds me of the play in the Titans and Rams Super Bowl. When he stopped. It was a little different, but... you're right there. You're right there, about to win the game, and then 2 inches. That's it. That's it. Football's a game of inches.
Yep.
And Malcolm Butler made a name for himself. He sealed another victory for Tom Brady in the Super Bowl. And what an incredible performance by him in that game. Just one of, like we've talked about, it's one of the best defenses we've ever seen in those Seahawks teams, and he carved them up. He had something like 350 yards and 4 touchdowns. They were down by 2 touchdowns in that game twice, and they came back both times.
Yep.
And it was just some incredible performance.
Yeah. And like on the last show we did, we were talking about Richard Sherman in that game, where I back up Richard Sherman, calling out Pete Carroll, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Because they were going for back-to-back.
Yeah.
And that defense would have been ranked if they would have won that, well, I think with the 85 Bears.
So I think they're probably in the conversation with the 85 Bears anyway. Obviously, I wasn't alive during that time to really say from my own eyes what I think, but just based on everything I know, I think they're in the conversation. But I think this would have topped them. You know, but obviously, Tom is Tom, and he did what he did, and obviously, Butler saved it, but Pete Carroll blew it.
Oh yeah.
Pete Carroll blew it probably more than Butler saved it.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the start of the decline for the Seahawks. That they've been playoff teams every year, but their defense started to fall apart. They weren't the Legion of Boom anymore. They started to lose a lot of their players because they had to pay Russell Wilson. Marshawn Lynch was only getting older, and it really was, I love it. It was the start of the decline of the Seahawks, and they're still a team that hangs around every year, but they haven't been back since.
Nope.
They haven't even really sniffed it since.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad Pete Carroll blew it for many reasons, but it really was the start of the decline because, Pete Carroll's this loosey-goosey guy, right?
Yeah.
We've seen it in New England and in Seattle. He's like, yeah, you guys go be you.
Right.
Chewing his gum. You guys go be you. And just a lot of the guys, I think, just lost a lot of respect for him. Like, that type of coaching works when it works, but then when you blow a game like that, it's kind of like, all right, well, now what?
Yep. Worst call in Super Bowl history. Later on, we'll be talking about your 49ers, and we're going to talk about maybe another kind of bad sequence of calling. But now, let's talk about Richard Sherman when he goes to your team, the 49ers.
Yeah.
They go to the Super Bowl, the Jimmy G Super Bowl. You guys are up 20-10. The finals 31-20. What happened with giving up 3 straight touchdowns in 5 minutes?
I mean, look, Patrick Mahomes is obviously a superstar and otherworldly quarterback, but
it's a nightmare.
It's one of those things where it's like, wow, like you got 7 minutes left, 8 minutes left, you pick off Pat Mahomes, you think you got the game, and then all of a sudden they rip off 3 straight. And part of that's on Sherman, right?
Yeah.
He was awesome. He was awesome that season. He made, I think, 2nd team All-Pro, Pro Bowl. He was awesome all year long. Even in the playoffs, he had an interception against Kirk Cousins and the Vikings. He had an interception the next week against Aaron Rodgers. And then they get to the Super Bowl, and he played a pretty solid game for the most part up until that last drive. There's about 3.5, 4 minutes left.
Who burned him?
Sammy Watkins. 38 yards, 40 yards.
Right.
Up to like the 15 or whatever it was, and then a play or a couple plays later, he whiffed on a tackle to Damian Williams, and that's when they took the lead. It was 20-17, and then he gave up 2 plays in a matter of 5 or 6 different plays, and I was recently watching that play, the Sammy Watkins one in particular. He looked tired and slow, right? He was awesome all year long, but he had recovered from that Achilles injury just a couple years prior. He was 31 or so at the time. He looked tired. He looked slow, and Sammy Watkins was this young guy, early 1st round pick who never lived up to that, but
he was.
That Chiefs team, they still are, but they were so fast. Obviously we think of Tyreek Hill and the running backs, but Sammy Watkins is a burner too.
Oh yeah.
And he made it known on that play.
Yeah, Sammy Watkins was a track star. He was number 10 pick in the draft, and Crabtree was number 10. He was a high pick.
Was he 10? I think.
He was a high pick. He played for that Mike Leach.
Yeah, he played for Texas Tech. And he was an awesome college player. And I just don't think he really had an offense or a quarterback that really
fit him.
I don't know if it wasn't like a high-powered passing offense with Alex Smith.
Yep.
You know, they had
Oh,
Frank
no.
Gore,
No.
and they loved to run the football, especially when Harbaugh came. And, he had a couple solid years, but eventually, I think his was an Achilles too. He ruptured his Achilles,
Yep.
and he was never really the same. He had one solid year after that. He ended up going to the Raiders, and he flamed out, but yeah.
So we're going to wrap this up about Richard Sherman. So certainly his finest hour was that Super Bowl victory, 43-8, and I back him up 110% about how he was frustrated, to say the least, with Pete Carroll, because they had back-to-back right there. Wasn't guaranteed, but you were on the 1 yard line.
Oh yeah.
So,
when you're on the 1 yard line with only a minute left,
Right.
it's not too much else to guarantee, especially when I think the pick happened on second down.
Yep.
It's not like it was fourth down and they're going for one more play.
Right, exactly. So that's going to wrap it up with Richard Sherman. Now we're going to switch and talk about your 49ers.
Yeah.
49ers, 5-2 Super Bowl record. So Joe Montana goes 4-0.
Yep.
Steve Young wins a ring. They're 5-0. So they're going for Jordan territory.
Yeah,
That
and then
Super
they
Bowl,
lose the two that I've seen.
Right, so that's
they won the year after I was born in '94, but of course the two that I've seen are the
Right,
two
so
losses.
let's talk about that one. The one with Harbaugh, the Harbaugh brothers.
Yeah.
And let's cut
That was
right
so
to,
cool.
Let's cut right to the chase. What happened at that 5 yard line? 3 straight passes to Michael Crabtree.
Which is weird because they were a running team, like we just talked about. Harbaugh loved to run the ball. That's what they were a hard-nosed defensive team. I mean, with Patrick Willis, Navarro Bowman, Justin Smith, I think Alden Smith, that was the year he really was an incredible.
Right, he was, yeah.
Dante Whitner. They had so many pieces. What the other safety is escaping me, but he was another hard hitter. They had so many pieces everywhere in defense, and then they ran the ball down everybody's throat.
Yeah,
and then they throw it, 3 straight times, and it's like it was weird, especially when you have Kaepernick, who is an incredible athlete. Just a couple games before that, he broke the NFL record for rushing yards in a game by a quarterback with 180 or 181 or whatever, whatever the number was. But a lot of people like to say Crabtree was held, and maybe he was. In my opinion, I don't think it was one of those holds that really needed to be called. If you call it, great. It's it could go either way. It was a ticky-tacky call that they call a lot in the league.
Yeah.
But I think with the Super Bowl on the line, it wasn't like an egregious call where it's like we gotta call that. It's obviously a hold. It was one of those ticky-tack calls. I would have loved to see them call it, obviously, but I don't think it necessarily warranted it. But that's what happened. He tries to go for the fade. Again, same thing. Back right corner of the end zone fade to Crabtree.
Ridiculous.
The next year we saw what happened on that same play. A different spot on the field where it came from, but this was more of a slant fade. The other one was a deep fade, but it was
you
tough
guys
loss,
had Randy
man.
Moss
Especially because the way they came back.
Right.
They were down big,
Yep.
and then the lights went out, and they really came back and stormed back. And the special teams in that game was a big reason they lost, because Jacoby Jones, who was lightning quick, returned a touchdown in that game to open up the second half, I think it was, and it was just, it was brutal. It was brutal to see that happen, and they did the best they could to storm back. I mean, it looked like they were getting blown out, and they really pulled it together, and
no, it was a good game.
2 yards, 5 yards away.
Right, because a couple times Baltimore went down and had to settle for a field goal, which helped you guys, and then you guys came back. It was back and forth, but you're at the 5 yard line. Now, Randy Moss, I'm assuming he was double covered on the other side.
Yeah, and he was older at that point in his career. He wasn't really like a great threat, But either way.
But still, Randy, I mean, wouldn't you have rather gone to him 3 times?
I believe they had Brandon Lloyd on the team that year too, and he was a really solid receiver for them. But again, older at that point. So it was surprising that they passed it there. They had Vernon Davis, who was an outstanding tight end for so many years, but the thing that blows me away more than anything during that run was Joe Flacco.
Yep.
He had a couple solid years. This
run.
was his fifth year in the league. He had a couple solid years.
Yep.
And in that playoffs, they were in the wild card round. They beat the Broncos, they beat the Patriots, and I forget the other team that they had to beat to get there.
Yep.
But he threw 11 passing touchdowns and 0 interceptions in those 4 games.
And he was a free agent next year, so he got paid.
And he got paid handsomely, and never did anything else after that. but I mean, he was awesome. You know, I hate to say that, but he was awesome in that game, awesome in that playoff run. You know, he's one of those guys where you look back on, you know, in 20 years, and you're gonna be like, yeah, Joe Flacco was never really a great quarterback, but that was one heck of a run.
He had a run.
You know, just it was almost like Eli Manning. Once you get into the playoffs, you know he's gonna play, but outside of that, he never really did anything special. And you know, they had Torrey Smith, who was a speedy guy. They had Anquan Bolden. I loved Anquan Bolden.
Yeah.
Always loved that guy. He's a tough-nosed player. You know, he's not necessarily a flashy guy like Randy Moss or something like that, but he knew where the chains were. He knew how to pick up first downs. And although he was never the fastest guy, he knew how to beat you and how to get open. Even if that open was only by this much to make the catch, he was tough. Tough.
Didn't he help? He helped Arizona get to that Super Bowl, Anquan Bolden, on that year.
Yeah, a few years earlier.
Good.
He was awesome in Arizona. I mean, I believe he has the most receiving yards for a rookie in a single game with 205, and I believe it was his first career game, something along those lines. It was crazy. But he ended up coming over to the 49ers, and then and he was awesome there. He was, he was like the last good receiver we've really had, to be honest. They've had a string of bad luck, the 49ers at receiver the past, 5, 6, 15 years.
Wow.
And which is funny because they had so many good so many good receivers. Obviously Jerry Rice speaks for himself, but Taylor and Dwight Clark and Terrell Owens and all these different guys, and then just the luck that they've had with these just awful receivers. And now they have a couple guys. I hope Debo can stay healthy, but he's been banged up quite a bit in his few years in. And Brendan Ayuk looks legit, so I'm really excited to see him. But back to Anquan Bolden. He ended up with us. He was awesome. And then a couple years later, Torrey Smith ends up with us. So it was just so funny how the two wide receivers who killed us in that Super Bowl end up coming on over and playing with us. And tough Super Bowl loss.
So you guys you were 5-0 in the Super Bowl heading into that one. You lose to Baltimore, so now you're 5-1. You're trying to get to Jordan territory again, and you guys face Patrick Mahomes in that Super Bowl.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about this one, and I never really thought we had much of a chance going in. Going into that year, I was like, if we make the playoffs, I'll be happy. Yeah. And they ended up one of the best teams in the league. I mean, they were, they went into the Superdome that year against Drew Brees and won. Yep. They had so many games where they went into Seattle at the end of the year. Was it in Seattle or at home? I can't quite remember, but either way, it was the last game of the season, and Dre Greenlaw, number 57, pops the tight end with this much room on the last play of the game, or fourth down. 49ers ended up going to win it, to go into home field advantage, and then they flew through the playoffs. I never expected them to be there, so I was just happy to go along for the ride. And obviously once you get there, you always have a chance, but I was like, against this Pat Mahomes team, he 55 touchdowns that year. He broke the record. Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, Sammy Watkins, Damian Williams. They had such a great cast of characters. Their defense wasn't great, but the second half of the year and into the playoffs, they picked it up when it mattered. Yeah. Tyrann Mathieu was a guy that scared the heck out of me. And he was awesome in that game. If I remember correctly, he had a pick. Yeah. He was awesome in that game, and they had just a couple of defensive guys on the defensive line who were awesome, and they made plays when it mattered, a couple of pass deflections in the game, and they started to roll in that game. They're up 20-10, and I'm like, wow, like these guys really have a shot. And then all of a sudden in the second half, the Chiefs defense stepped up. The 49ers offense just and it was weird because they were such a running team. They literally threw the ball 6 or 8 times in the game prior, in the championship game, and then the split for the year was like 55% run plays, 45% pass plays, and in the Super Bowl it was like 58-42 the other way. So it's like you get to the Super Bowl on your run game with Raheem Mostert, who broke the 49ers rushing record in a playoff game with over 200 yards. Yep. You know, and then all of a sudden, Tevin Coleman was really good that year. And you know, the offensive line, all of it, right? They had the whole picture, especially for the run game. And you go away from it. Now, with that said, I thought Jimmy was the better quarterback for about 2.5 quarters.
He was.
And a huge play in that game was George Kittle.
Yep.
Right before the first half ended, he gets his huge gain down the sideline, and it's one of those things that's ticky-tacky call.
Yeah.
You know, they called him for a pass interference, which
that was that was a controversial call.
I don't think it. You know, again,
Yep.
I tried to be as unbiased as possible. You know, I said earlier the Crabtree one in the Super Bowl prior probably shouldn't have been a hold,
Yep.
but and it wasn't. This one I don't think should have been an offensive pass interference. I get it. You know, there's certain ticky-tack calls that you make, but it was such a huge call. They really had a chance to go up big before halftime, and it ended up totally going the other way. Such a huge call. Such a huge call.
And a lot of 49er fans, they put that game on Jimmy G because he didn't hit that long pass to Sanders.
Yeah, and you know, not only that play to Sanders, but it was right around that same time. I don't know if it was, you know, a couple plays later or you know, the drive earlier. I forget exactly when it was in the game. Try to block it out. But Kittle was open for a first down underneath, and I mean, he was wide open, and he. You know, when Kittle gets the ball in his hand, he's as explosive as anybody. Yeah. And Jimmy didn't even look his way, which is it was awful because the pass ended up deflected going the other way when, you know, it could have been a wide open gain for George Kittle to run freely down the middle of the field for a huge gain. And you know, that's when they were. I think it was 20-17 at that point. And you know what ends up happening is they go the other way and they score to take the lead. You know, you let Pat Mahomes get one touchdown and there's still time, and you're only down now by 3 instead of 10.
Yep.
Anything can happen at that point. Yep. And then once you go up 24, you know, you make one stop. The game was pretty much over. The 49ers still technically had a chance. They technically had time, but then Damian Williams broke that touchdown. You know, huge play up the sideline, and they obviously couldn't pull anything together from there. But tough loss, man, because I didn't give them much of a shot, but they really played hard for most of the game. And then
5.5 minutes.
There's one call on Kittle that gets called. There's another call, you know, specifically that I remember that could have been called on Bosa that doesn't get called. So it's like, you know, I never want to blame penalties because they happen both ways. But, you know, there are certain things that you look back on that it's like, if only this was called a little different, and it could have been.
On either of those Super Bowls, did Michael Jordan come to your mind? Because you guys were going for 6-0.
Right.
Because when the Patriots played the Eagles, Brady was 5-2.
Yeah.
So I was thinking Jordan territory.
Yeah, I never really thought of it that way because, you know, obviously it's a different sport, but it wasn't like it wasn't one team, right? It was they did it with the 49ers in the 80s and Joe Montana, and then they did it with Steve Young once.
Right.
And then it was, you know, essentially almost 20 years later, with a whole different landscape of the league, a whole different team, coach, this, that, ownership even, right? Even ownership was different. So I never thought of it in that regard just because it wasn't, you know, it's not like it was Joe Montana going for number 5 or number 6. You know, when Brady went for, you know, number 5 and number 6, you started to think of that because it's one guy, right? Whereas Jordan, it was like it was Jordan going for 6 and
Phil Jackson.
Yeah, and Phil Jackson, you know, but the organization, and it was, you know, boom, 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 where, you know, again, the 49ers were just, it was just a totally different era and time and team and all of that. So I never really made that comparison, but
you're going to
not like I did with Brady when he was going for 5, 6, and because obviously now he's got 7.
Right, because he lost to the Eagles, and then the next year they beat the Rams, and he got to 6.
Yeah.
But the thing is, Lombardi's 5-1 in championship games. Popovich is 5-1.
Yeah.
You guys are 5-2. That's 6 in sports because of Michael Jordan. It's something special.
Yeah.
To get to MJ.
Yeah.
And you know, like I said, you guys are 5-2. Now moving forward with your 49ers, you got a young quarterback. Got a great offensive coach. I think a good GM. So what do you think moving forward? But a tough division.
Yeah, a tough division, but I really like what they put together over the past few years. I thought it came together quicker. You know, like I said, in 2019, I thought I'd be happy with a playoff team, and lo and behold, during the Super Bowl, you know, 2020 they were killed with injuries. Like I've never seen the team suffer injuries like that before. And obviously they miss out in the playoffs by a couple of games in a tough division.
Very tough.
But I really like what they're putting together because they have blue chip players.
Yeah.
Right? You know, they have a guy in Fred Warner who's one of the best linebackers in the league. They have a guy in Kittle who is arguably the best tight end in the league. You know, you want to say Kelsey, that's fine, but to me, Kelsey's a receiver, Kittle's a tight end. There's, you know, they're both tight ends, but they play different positions.
They do. Like Tony Gonzalez was more of a receiver.
But even Tony was, you know, blocking. You know, I don't remember too much of his career because I watched more of it later on. But
I think Kittle's more like Gronk, where he's more physical.
Yeah, he's an extra offensive lineman who's a great receiver on top of it, right?
Kittle's good.
But so they have Kittle, they have Warner, they have Nick Bosa coming back from injury this year, who's, you know, I love the player because he's on my team and I know how good he is. But then you see guys around the league talk about him, and it just shows you how good he really is. You know, sometimes you're like, oh yeah, he's good because he's on my team and I can see his talent. But the way that guys around the league talk about him, it's really like, it takes me a step back and I'm like, wow, like this dude's really that good, huh?
Yeah.
You know, so Bosa, you know, they have Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, Raheem Mostert, you know, they have a lot of pieces on offense. I think they're all young for the most part, and I think they're still putting that together. But Shanahan has proven that he's so good on offense that he's going to work with what he has. And, you know, he has Nick Mullins, and Nick Mullins he's got the second most passing yards through 16 games in NFL history, and the guy can't even be a backup for the Eagles, who don't have a real quarterback.
Yeah, that's the one I heard that really got McVay, we'll say, frustrated with Goff, that Mullins beat you guys. I mean, beat the Rams.
Yeah, you know, he has Nick Mullins and C.J. Beathard looking like they might be quarterbacks, you know, and then they're not, obviously, but so what he can do on offense, I have full trust in. And then the defense, you know, they have so many players, like I said, they have a lot of the top-end talent, but then they have guys like, you know, Jimmy Ward, Emmanuel Mosley, who's coming together. They have a couple of young guys they drafted that I think could really be good. Dre Greenlaw, as I mentioned earlier, who's a really good second linebacker. And as far as the division goes, I have zero trust in Cliff Kingsbury coaching the Cardinals, right? He just doesn't seem like he gets it. So they don't really scare me. You know, Kyler Murray is awesome, but the team as a whole doesn't really scare me. And the Seahawks, you know, obviously we've talked about them a little bit today, and they have Russell Wilson, who definitely scares me, but you know, we've said they haven't been the same team since they lost that Super Bowl. And Pete Carroll is a guy who I don't really trust anymore. He's so like, I want to run the ball. I want to run the ball. Dude, you have like one of the top 3 to 5 quarterbacks in the entire league. Like, make better use of that. They have a scary wide receiver in DK Metcalf, another awesome receiver in Lockett. But their defense it is, to say it's a shell of its old self is almost an understatement, right? Like they have some guys on there, but they're an average defense. The Rams are the one team that stick out to me because of Aaron Donald. That guy can wreck any game he plays in, and they have obviously a lot of other pieces there. Jalen Ramsey, another guy who can wreck any game that he's in. And Matt Stafford, I think he's awesome. I think he's a huge upgrade over Goff. I think they have receivers there, but I don't know. Shanahan's kind of always had McVay's number, and you know, I think those two are kind of the class of the division right now.
Do you know what other sport Aaron Donald played in high school and college? I didn't know that. He's a wrestler.
Oh, that doesn't even surprise me.
Doesn't that
doesn't surprise
make sense
me.
What
it
he's
does,
doing?
because he's such a tough dude. He uses his
was
hands so well. He moves so well. You know.
Do you remember
so that doesn't surprise me at all to know he's a wrestler.
Do you remember where he was picked? Like, was he a top 10 pick, Aaron Donald? He was from Pittsburgh.
I don't think he was, to be honest. I think he dropped down because he's short. But sometimes it doesn't matter. You know, he's short. He's like 6 foot. You know, 6'1". He's short for his position. but he's he's certainly the best in the league, but he's one of the best that's ever done it, right?
Oh yeah.
We think of guys over the last 20 years who are great defenders, since LT played.
Yep.
And there's like obviously guys like, Ed Reed and Ray Lewis and stuff like that. But as far as defensive linemen
He's
and just the
right up there.
best in general, there's J.J. Watt and there's Aaron Donald. And the conversation pretty much ends there for me. There's other guys who are really good,
Not
but
that good.
when even Ndamukong Suh was really good for
Right,
so long,
real
but
good. But not that dominant. Like if Richard Seymour was good, but not as good as Aaron Donald.
no, J.J. Watt and Aaron Donald were just
yeah,
absolutely like top of the class, some of the best we'll ever see. Not that we've ever seen, but we'll ever see, even future moving forward, right?
You know what's something about Shanahan's offense at McVay? People think it's a flashy offense with a lot of movement. They like to power running football.
They're power teams.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they are.
They are. Yeah, it's flashy because it works, right? There are
lot
other
of movement.
offenses that are flashier.
Yeah.
I think like the Saints have an air raid offense where they're throwing down the field. Even the Buccaneers, they're throwing down the field, right? And that's flashy, but the 49ers and the Rams who run a similar offense, even the Packers who run a similar offense, they're not these teams that are like, they'd rather run it first. You have Aaron Rodgers, you're going to throw the ball, right? But they pound the football down your throat, not just with the run game, but even with the passing game.
Yeah.
They're taking these screen passes for 15 yards, so it's part of your passing game, but it's essentially a run. You dump it off to the wide receiver, and then you got the other 3 wide receivers or 2 wide receivers blocking for you.
Yep.
They're tough physical teams.
I'm
looking forward to the next few years to really see the Rams and the 49ers matchups. And to me, those are the 2 teams you look out for out of that division.
Yeah.
I've said you have to look out for the Seahawks because they have Russell Wilson, they have the quarterback, and that's half the battle. But as far as like full teams and depth goes, it's the 49ers and the Rams have the most of that in that division.
Yep. So what about your young quarterback, Trey Lance? What do you see?
I see a guy who is raw. That's what they said
That's
coming
right.
out. He's raw, but he has maybe the most talent out of all of them.
Yeah.
Right, out of this year's class. Lawrence, Wilson, Justin Fields, and Mac Jones. But I see a guy who has so much talent. He has incredible arm strength. He's so fast, and I just think he has to get comfortable.
Yeah.
That's what I think. I think once he gets comfortable, he's a really smart guy, and that's what Shanahan talked about. Coming out of the draft with him is he's a very cerebral guy. He learns, he processes, he takes in information. They were talking about halfway through the offseason, he already knew the playbook.
Yeah.
And if you know anything about the Niners, a lot of people talk about how it's not an easy playbook to learn.
Yeah.
And so he's done a really good job adapting to that. I just think he has to get, he didn't play all year last year. He played in one game because the college season was canceled for COVID for his school. And the year that he did play prior to that, the guy threw like 2 picks and 20-something touchdowns. I mean, he was awesome. His interception so his decision-making seems like it's really high.
Yeah.
So when you have a high decision-making, along with that athletic ability, I think there are certain times he has to put more touch on the ball.
Yeah.
But I've seen it, so I know he can do it, whereas Kaepernick, right? I never saw Kaepernick throw a touch pass in his time in the league.
Yeah.
Everything was a bullet, straight through, boom, straight line. Like,
Kaepernick was a comet when he came into the league.
yeah,
Just
but the thing is, Trey Lance is just like that, but I think he has the ability to throw with touch.
pass,
He has to learn a little bit of that in-game speed.